Welcome back to the FDU Equinox Roundtable. My name is Amaya Morales, and I am the managing editor. This week we will be talking about student life and what is to come regarding the fall semester. And our student lifestyle editor, Kenny Lowe, will have more on that.
All right, how's it going, guys? Thank you, Amaya. I am Kenny Lowe, the student lifestyle editor for the Equinox. This week, we are discussing the future state of student events at FDU and what to expect when and if we return for the fall semester. So the Equinox contacted Angelo Profagna, the communications official, who referred us to Mr. Steve Nelson over here, the campus executive, who is here with us today. And thank you for that, by the way. Hello, Mr. Nelson. Thank you for joining us in this important discussion. So we'll begin. So President Christopher Capuano talked briefly about events and activities on campus in yesterday's president update. But we have just a few follow-up questions. We're hoping you can help us, elaborate on these things. Number one, following the rules for student events, what specific guidelines are in place for fall in-person events?
Okay, so obviously we are working hand in hand with guidelines from the state and from the CDC. So we are following all of that. So with respect to guidelines for events, we will be obviously, masks will be mandatory everywhere, okay? That's now, governor signing that today, so even outdoors is going to be required. Obviously social distancing is going to be a mandate. So as you might imagine, that puts some restrictions on indoor events. Because of social distancing, we're talking about a 6-foot circle around your body. And so everyone has to be able to maintain that 6 feet distance around themselves in a 360-degree circle, which really cuts down the capacity of many rooms that we normally use. In addition to that, many of our rooms may also be used as classrooms, because some of the rooms that we normally are familiar with, like Rutherford Room and the NPR, are larger venues. And so we may need them for classes as well, because they can accommodate more students in a classroom setting. So when we can use rooms, it will have to be with the restrictions of occupancy based on that 6-foot distancing. Masks will still be required. What you're gonna find is more events will probably likely be happening outside, because we can distance a lot easier as long as the weather holds. And then obviously we're going to have a large amount of our events online, so that everyone can enjoy the events and attend in more of a group setting without actually creating that contact between people.
Okay. So to fill the need for more activities, like I mentioned, online, this is on his latest update. President Capuano mentioned on his latest update that these new online platforms that will keep students engaged with each other. Do you have any idea what these might be? Could you list some examples?
Well, we're still working on that. We're still solidifying which ones we can use. Our IT department is actively engaged with our student life folks and working with them to try to find the best platforms that most people are familiar with and usable. We had one this year that was, forgive me, I don't recall the name right now, where folks could collaborate on study and work together in study groups and things of that sort. So that type of platform where people can gather and work together on different things. Obviously Zoom will be a big thing, Microsoft Meetings, those kind of platforms, but there may be other ones as well that we can do on a more social level. Again, I don't have any firm answer on that yet because it hasn't been solidified.
Okay, and what safety guidelines do you believe needs to take place for in-person events to continue?
Well, like I said, it's exactly what we were talking about. We have to maintain social distancing. We have to maintain the mask wearing. We have to maintain the sanitation. We'll be doing a lot of cleaning of rooms in between uses, high touch points, door handles, various things. Water fountains won't be able to be used, so people want to, use water bottles or things of that sort. Unless we have the refillable water fountain. There's some of those on campus as well. But it's going to be all the standard ones that we're going to be experiencing in everything, whether it be an event or a class or just normal day-to-day activity.
Okay, and CDC guidelines also recommend businesses to have separate hours of operation for immunocompromised and high-risk people? Like, what processes are being considered that could be applied in our university to protect this population? I mean, I know you mentioned the social distancing thing, but is there other?
Sure. So there's a few things here. We are, as you read in President Capuano's email, we are going to be instituting screening. Everyone will need to be doing screening every day. We're finalizing which app we're using on that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so we will be reporting that out every morning. And if there's a red flag that occurs, maybe somebody's got a high temperature, some kind of symptom that can be equated to COVID, our student health services will be notified, and we're going to work with that student to get them the help that they need to make sure. And the first step will be either quarantine, then isolation. Quarantine is for people under observation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have certain rooms within the residence halls set aside that will not be occupied by students that under normal circumstances, that will be set aside for quarantine and isolation, depending on the circumstance. So they will be available for those circumstances. Our student health services will be working with those students. We'll also have some third-party help with those, and they will be tested. So to make sure that the testing is good. We're not going to test everyone, because please understand one thing. Testing for COVID is a snapshot in time. In other words, if I take a test today, and when I get that result 2 days from now, that only says that I was negative today. That doesn't tell me what happens right after that test, right? I could have been exposed the next minute and now be positive, but the test will still come back negative. So testing is really just a snapshot in time. So we're going to reserve that more for people that are symptomatic, people that need that, and in certain circumstances with our student athletes that are traveling, maybe there's a circumstance where another team is become affected, something like that, okay? So we will have that availability, but it will not be a widespread usage because it really doesn't give us anything. The screening does. The screening allows us to get a head start on these symptoms and work with folks. So we will have then, like I said, we will start with quarantining. It may be too that you're quarantined in your room or in your suite. So if you're living in a suite, say you get exposed and it's noticed that you're exposed, or you get a cough, or you get the fever or something like that, it's likely that your suite mates will also be quarantined with you, okay, because they've been exposed to you. Because the only place that if you live on campus, the only place that you can be without a mask is going to be in your own personal room, right? So they've likely been exposed. So that the suite mates will be quarantined as well until we get the 14 days and we get the negative test, no symptoms, and then we can release that, or we progress onward, okay? So those are the kind of things we're looking at. As far as someone who is immunocompromised and wishes to have those accommodations met, we're working that process out. An email will be going out probably next week on people who can request accommodations for that. Be they personally immunocompromised, or if they live with somebody who is that. So say they are a commuter student and they live at home with a grandparent who is more elderly or has a medical issue that they could risk harming that individual. They can request some accommodations for that as well. And if they're living on campus, they can request a medical single based on that piece. Okay, so that's why when you said that we're opening more medical singles, if you personally say if you're undergoing treatment for a medical issue, you can request that medical single, which will allow you to stay within yourself and be less exposed. But as far as our services, we are going to be having, the likelihood is we will have an application that you can request appointments for all of these different services. Plus the availability is that every one of these services will be online as well. So you can continue on like you're doing today with your advising for academic advising, or if you need to meet with a financial aid advisor or enrollment services or someone like that, you can meet with them online. So you won't have to go and be out in public and risk that issue.
Okay. I mean, I love, like field trips and stuff. I still do. I don't know if some of you guys, but will shuttle transportation for events continue? And if so, with what safeguards do you think?
Unfortunately, for the fall semester, the answer is going to be no.
No. Okay.
We have to look at our first concern, just like the president said, our first concern is health and safety of our students and our community members at large. And field trips are just uncontrollable. Number one, you have a lack of social distancing in a vehicle, right?
Right.
So there's one thing right there. And then we're going to a place that we don't control what happens there.
Yeah.
So we don't know who's exposed. Are they following the rules that are in place? Are you putting yourself unnecessarily at risk? In addition, we have things like we do these popular trips like to Broadway and things like that. And unfortunately, Broadway's shut down for the rest of the year. Okay, so obviously we can't have those. So we are really kind of going to curtail all of the shuttle trips, at least for the fall. We like them too, and we would love to have them. But the fact is that we have to look out for our community members first.
No.
And it is really students first.
Well, okay, and well, we do. We appreciate everything that you guys are planning right now. And speaking to that, what is like the most significant change or shift to university events that have been, that you've encountered so far in the planning process?
It's going to be how we hold them, given the environment that we have today. The biggest shift, obviously, is that we can't have some of the events that we are very familiar with and we've come to love. There's things like, think about the galas that we have at the end of the fall semester. Think about some of the speakers that we bring in, and some of these events that we just simply cannot hold because we cannot do them in that socially distanced, safe environment. So that piece is one of the biggest. Now, some of them will be transmitted to an online environment, and we can still do some of it in that regard. But that camaraderie, it's important. It's important to the college life. The socialization piece is huge, and we want to get that as much as possible. The online environment is going to be our best substitute for that until such time as we can all get together again. As soon as we can, we will. Okay, but we want to make sure it's safe. So that shift in how we do events is the biggest piece of it. We want to do the outdoor events as much as we can, but there again, we're still going to be a mask. We're still going to be socially distant. So, to me, an event is almost better online right now in today's environment, because just think about it this way. We couldn't sit in a room together and talk without it being like almost the size of the NPR, right? And we would be in all four corners of the rooms. Right now, we can be face to face. We can see each other's body language and things like that. It makes it more of a contact piece than if it were in a large room with just the 7 of us, or 6 of us, excuse me. So from that regard, I think that's what you're going to find is the biggest shift. And then when we can resume normal events, what we consider normal events, we absolutely will. But it's a matter of what is the new normal, and we won't know that until things go forward. And we won't know exactly what we can and cannot do until we get to that point. Because think about it, things are changing at the drop of a hat. Okay, so we first have to get to that phase 3 that the president was talking about, and the governor will decide if and when we get to that point. Okay, but even within that, he could make carve-outs and not allow something, or limit the number of people on something, or whatever that case may be. So we won't absolutely know what we can and cannot do until almost, right before we actually try to do it. And that's going to be the biggest thing. We all have to have flexibility. We all have to have flexibility, and we all have to take care of each other. And it's the only way we can do that is we all take responsibility for it as one big team.
Okay. How's how's the task force doing, like handling this thing with the whole decision-making process, with the line of what they have to do, basically?
It's been a very eye-opening and interesting journey. The amount of moving pieces at a university, it just is mind-blowing. How many different operations that we do, and you think about it, but then you really don't until you get really deep involved in it, like we are with the task force. We're looking at every little piece, and then you think one piece brings up, oh, well, what about this? Or what about that? What about a third? And every piece that you mentioned brings up 2 and 3 more. So it's a very, very large, complex organization that we have. And so the task force has been working very hard. We've split into sub-teams to work on various components of it. So even within our operations task force, there's a sub-team that's working on the health screening and the health monitoring and all of that good stuff. There's another one working on residential life. There's another one working on athletics. There are various sub-teams along the way, and then we all come together, we bring it together, we put all this forth. And what we're creating is this big document, which is a recommendation to our president and our board of trustees, and then ultimately the state. The state gets this plan, because we can't do anything until the state approves that.
Recently, the Trump administration released a new policy stating that international students must be enrolled in a university that has in-person courses or in order to stay in the U.S. What are your thoughts on this in terms of FDU's own international community?
Right. So obviously we have to abide by whatever the law of the land is. Okay, that's our first thing. But I know that there are some schools that are challenging this, but whatever the law of the land is, we will abide by it. That said, right now we are planning on being open. We are planning on in-person classes. So unless something happens that don't allow us to have that, we should be fine. And that rule really won't apply to us as long as we're having those in-person classes, which is our plan and our goal for right now.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Nelson, for answering some of these pressing questions. If you'd like to hang around for a bit, we may come back to you while our students over here.
That's fine.
To lead the student discussion, I have Joanna Marino, the news editor of the Equinox, with me. Joanna, will you take it?
Hello, my name is Joanna Marino, and first off, I'd like to thank the student leaders of their respective organizations for taking time out of their days to be here. Juan Lorenzo Martinez and Calissa Nufable. Thank you. Your time is very much appreciated. So I'd like to start out with direct questions to each guest and then move on to open discussion, if we will. So in the recent President's update, it states that in-person events are allowed to continue should they follow safety and distancing guidelines, like what Mr. Steve Nelson said. So however, if the pandemic worsens or an outbreak hits at the university, all in-person activities can be suspended. So given this, Juan Lorenzo Martinez, answering as the president of the Intergreek Council, since the first 3 weeks of the fall are online, are you considering virtual recruitment or postponing recruitment events altogether?
Well, I think it comes down to, I would keep virtual, honestly, because Mr. Nelson, he had a good point. With things virtual, you're able to be face-to-face and you can still have that interaction with other potential new members. You can still get to know them. You can still you see how they are, you see how they act, you see how they talk, you see what interests them, things like that, which is crucial, because with Greek life, it's all about getting to know your new members. It's not, to me, I never saw it as just, just bringing in people just to bring in people. It's about getting to know these new members, and we can easily achieve that doing it virtually. Is it going to be different? Absolutely. It's going to be very different. But that still gives us that aspect of getting to know our potential new members. And seeing it's all a new journey for all of us in every aspect. So I would definitely encourage each organization to have virtual events, virtual recruitment events, things like that, to keep the students engaged.
So speaking of, how do you think virtual recruitment will affect the number of members joined and retained in Greek life as a whole?
The way I see it is, if someone's interested, they'll be interested. No matter who it is, or I think, I honestly don't know how it would hit in terms of numbers. But each organization, we do want our organizations to grow, as well as any other organization. We want our organization to flourish, have our community build. I don't really know, because there's different moving parts. Because maybe a certain new member is interested, but they have certain obligations, like family. Like, there's a lot of moving parts that may prevent someone from further exploring an organization. So there's a lot of moving parts to it. But I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see how this works, because I'm definitely here to make the most out of things, see the positive out of things. And that's what we as Greek organizations, as well as other organizations on campus, who try to bring the positives out of things, help our community out in any way possible. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Definitely. In the spring semester, an event called Greek Week was reportedly canceled. So are preparations being made for the fall to prevent canceling of other events?
That's definitely in That's definitely in the works because there's a lot of moving parts. One of our biggest events is Meet the Greeks, where potential new members and everyone can just come together and have a good time. Look at different organizations, but obviously that there has to be two different routes because typically that would be the third Thursday or the third week of September, which by then classes are how do you say it? They may be in person, so things might be a little, you know, um, there's a lot of moving parts, like Mr. Nelson said. Are things in the work of keeping things virtual? Yes, because we have to plan that way. We do, in terms of having like different like just different events, keeping like how do you say it? Um, Thinking outside the box. You have to be adaptable, and that's one of the things that um, we as a community have to keep in mind. So there's two different routes. So there's one where we may be able to have events like outdoor events, stuff like that, but we also have to plan for having strictly virtual events.
So this next question is a burning question that I know many Greek members have. So since new member processes had to end early in the spring, and multiple organizations were unable to initiate their members virtually due to organization standards, how will the Inter-Greek Council support integrating the new Greeks into the community?
How will like the new members adapt? Is that correct?
Yes.
Absolutely. So I guess that's getting them involved in like say the virtual like events and things like that, spotlighting them, because as you mentioned, things were cut short, or things were cut short. Some organizations were not able to have a showcase to where they can really like pop out. Definitely it's having a spotlight on each new member, because every member of our council is crucial. Every member counts. Nobody will fall under the I don't know how to say it. Like nobody will fall under. Every new member will have a showcase, in terms of like virtual. Um, I know in the past, like in the spring, the members that were able to be initiated virtually, um, they were showcased on the Instagram. But in the fall, we can have another in turn posting them again. It's like, hey, like these new members just came in. It's all about integrating them as well as our current members as well, because we're all one community. You know, I became a brother in spring 18. There's people spring 17, people spring 19, and the new members spring 20. We're all one community. So it comes down to integrating not only new members but also spotlighting our current members as well, because we're all one community.
Okay, thank you, Lorenzo. So, Kalisa Nufable, answering as the FDU Barcata Club's incoming president, congratulations on that position. Since Barcata is a social club for Filipino students, do you believe your theme can be transferable online? Like, how would your approach change to reach the Filipino student population at FDU during online instruction?
So I think that again, we have to be adapted because like we have to be. I'm confident in our board that we can create events that can keep students engaged while also kind of sharing our culture with everybody. Online, I know we can do a lot of different events too. So in the past, the way that we've kind of integrated Filipino culture into our events in person, at least, we've had um, like different events. One of them was like a Jeopardy, so that I know is very easy to do online. There are different like presentations that we have. So in terms of like integrating, I guess, that information too. I don't think that it'll be that hard. It'll be different for sure, but I think it's achievable.
So are there any plans for future Barcata events in the making right now?
So the way that we create events, we do have kind of like a rough outline for the year in terms of like when events go. So usually they're like holiday themed or the time of the year, depending. But obviously that's going to be very different. So we have had events online this past spring semester. I think we were one of the only orgs. I don't know for sure, but I know that we definitely still did have events even if they were online and we couldn't do them in person. All throughout April, we had an event every week. And we did have a good turnout. It wasn't just like the e-board. All of our members, if they're able to come, they could come. So yeah, I think that if we do have to have all our events online, we'll still be able to do that. We'll have to be like creative again and kind of keep people engaged because I know for me it's like hard to stay engaged when it's like talking to my laptop kind of awkward in your room. So we as an e-board, we like to think, okay, um, our members aren't going to see the behind the scenes. They're not going to see like how much thought is going into whatever events. Like as an e-board, you think that your event is really, really interesting and people can talk about all these different things. But as a member, it's a little bit different seeing it from like the outside. So we like to put ourselves into our like members' shoes and kind of see what they would want to see as students.
Thank you. So last but not least, as student leaders, do you guys have any questions for our campus executive regarding everything that's been discussed?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. My takeaway is that we're gonna keep, obviously, I think this is like the universal thing, is that our health and safety is the most important thing. So as long as we keep that a priority, I think everything else will kind of fall into place. And then we have to be, I guess, again, like adaptive because things are changing all the time. So yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, I agree. I think pretty much everything was covered. There's a lot of moving parts, so there's not going to be a lot of definitive answers at this point. Um, it's it's a tough time. It's a tough time trying to think about what's going to happen, how are we going to approach certain situations. But I think pretty much everything was covered. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Like personally for me, I appreciate that you guys, all the things that you guys have done, that the amount of options that you guys looked at, I really appreciate that. Again, like I also like the fact that you guys were looking for more of the in-person options before jumping the online thing, because social, licensing is a big part of, campus life, student life, and all that. So yes, thank you. So yeah, I would just like to thank our campus executive, Mr. Steve Nelson over here, and our student leaders for being here today, guys. We also contacted other people, but I guess they couldn't make it, or can't be reached. But we appreciate you guys for being here now. So thank you so much. We look forward to.
If I can leave you with one last thing. So one thing that I would like to ask folks is, thank you for mentioning that one, Louise, about the flexibility. We have to be flexible, okay? Yeah. Things are going to change on a dime sometimes, and we have to adapt. So I think this gives us some good skill sets to really work on for all of us, which is finding plans A, B, and C, so that we're not locked into a certain path, that we can swivel as the circumstances dictate. Okay, and I think that's a great plan for life. That's a life skill that all of us need. And this is something that is really going to help us as we move forward, both as a university and you as students. Me personally, it's teaching me how to react differently, because we are in a time that nobody's experienced, right? The other thing I want to pass along is we have to please help us keep the diligence with all students, okay? Keeping diligence with the social distancing, with the mask wearing and things like that. It's too easy to get comfortable and forget. And that's when people get into trouble. And that's when we're seeing that in some of our states right now, where you see the large parties and you see the bars and people go out and they get into these large things and they think they're okay. Or the folks that are in their early 20s and believe that they're not going to be affected with this. This is an older person's thing. It's not. It's everybody, right? And you're seeing the age level of people getting this virus getting younger, because these are the folks that, and they just lose their diligence. They're going out and they're going to the bars and they're having a good time because, you know, darn it, I've been cooped up forever and now it's time to go out and have some fun. I get it, but that's when we get in trouble right now. We all have to maintain this and we have to keep it going for as long as we need to make sure that our community is safe. So, you know, I'm personally encouraging folks to really limit how much outside activities we do and the exposure that we have, because we want you here, we want you finishing, we want you moving on in your careers and not getting tied up with getting ill. Okay, so we have to maintain that throughout the whole semester, and it's going to be more important as we go. The further along we get, because it could be October and we're thinking, okay, you know, we've done this for long enough and we're used to it, we can't stop. And if we can maintain that, you're going to see signs around the campus, you're going to see signs on the doors and reminders everywhere we go. Don't let that become background over time. They got to stay up front. And if we can do that, then we'll be in good shape and we can get through this, but it's going to take all of us. We all have to be responsible for each other. This isn't, oh, if they do it, I'm okay. It's all of us have to do it for each other.
Very well said. And with that, all right, Amaya?
Well, thank you all for being here. It's Mr. Steve Nelson and two organization presidents of IGC and Barcata. And I would like to end today's roundtable with a like, comment, share, and subscribe on our YouTube channel. Also follow us on IG. We will also link IGC's account. I believe they have one on Instagram. If they don't, we got it. And Barcata's Instagram in the description below. So wash your hands, wear your masks, and social distance. Thank you and have a nice day.
For Mr. Nelson. One thing that caught my eye on the email was something about the dining. I saw that it was delivery and pickup. How exactly would the delivery work? Like, who is delivering the food? And like, how would that work? I was just curious because I read it and I was a little intrigued by it. But how exactly would that work?
So I wish I could get into all the details. They're not finalized, but okay. When they do get finalized, it's very exciting. What I know to be the case, it's very exciting. But in the interim, look, worst case scenario, and that's not even a worst case, but it would be that there's delivery available from our gourmet folks.
Okay.
Things like that. Don't forget, you have mobile ordering, right? So that you can pre-order ahead of time, go in and pick it up and leave. So your exposure is limited. There's likely going to be some as long as in-person dining is allowed under phase 3 with the state, then we're going to be allowed to eat in the halls, in the cafeteria, in the sub, again with social distancing, all of that good stuff. So you won't see things like the salad bars. You won't see grab as much as you want, you know, and do the 5 heaping platefuls. You may have to go back, but the food will still be there, okay? But it's, again, within a safe environment. The training from the staff, they will be going through extra training, food handling training under these circumstances. There's a lot of positive here, but there are some other things that our Vice President of Auxiliary Services is working with them on. And I hope what he's proposing to them and what they're talking about right now comes to pass, because it's very cool. Okay, I wish I could tell you more. I'm sorry I can't, but I don't want to have you count on it and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? But
right. That makes sense.
If it does come to pass, it'll be really neat.
Cool.